This is my podcast. What the heck am I doing? Hello, my name is Nelson, and welcome to the Nelly's Echo podcast. Yes, I am doing this finally. Like I said, my name is Nelson, and I do go by Nelly's Echo as my performance name. I'm a singer, songwriter, musician in the local Baltimore area, and for the longest time, I've always wanted to do a podcast. Even before it became a trend, even before it became popular, I always thought I had something, relevant to say, and and hence I thought in the past, it'd be cool to do a podcast, and of course I procrastinated and kind of let that idea, put that idea on the shelf. But I'm glad I'm picking it back up right now. So yes, this is my podcast, and um, I will tell you more about that to come. But before I go into that, I want to address some questions you might have concerning, why am I doing the podcast right now? Like, why a podcast? Aren't you a musician, Nelson? Why the podcast? And everything that I have been successful at doing in my life has come out of taking a leap of faith. Like I said earlier, the podcast idea was something that um, I knew I always wanted to do, but maybe was afraid to delve into this world because it's fairly foreign to me. Um, I sometimes don't like the sound of my own voice, which is funny as a musician and a singer, but my I've grown to learn to love my speaking voice. Not to say that my speaking voice is terrible in any way. It's just to say that I'm overly critical sometimes of my singing voice and my talking voice. So I'm this is a step of faith for me. But everything good in my life that has come to me has come from taking a leap of faith. I'll give you a good example. So um, in 2010, I I quit my full-time job as a physical therapist. A really good job, good pay, good benefits, security, everything was set up just perfectly. And I quit that job and I hit the road as a full-time musician. Now, when I did do that, I understand I had lined up some shows, I believe the spring of 2010, maybe it was 2019. Forgive me if I mix up the years. But I quit my full-time job and hit the road. I had a couple of shows lined up, but the life of a musician is very unstable. One season you are hot, and the next season um, you barely have any gigs to sustain your lifestyle. And I quit my job and I hit the road, and I figured out a way to make it work. Um, and that was a leap of faith then, and just that action I took because I followed my passion, which is music, has allowed me to travel the world. I've traveled to 48 states, um, except for Hawaii and Alaska. In the past 10 years, 48 states. I've traveled to Aruba, I've traveled to Cuba, I've traveled to uh, where else? Cameroon, Sierra Leone. I believe I'm missing one more country, but just my gift for gab and music and taking a leap of faith has enabled me to make music my passport to travel the world. Um, Another thing that I did that was a leap of faith too. Before I took that action to become a full-time musician, what I did was I I um, I made my first ever album recording, my first ever CD. I think it was an EP. It was like 5 songs, I believe. And when I listen back to those 5 songs today, I cringe, not because I'm not proud of the songs, but I cringe because it was very poorly done to my very high standards now. But at that point, I just knew I wanted to create something, and I had no idea how to create music. I never had any music training, music education. I didn't grow up as a musician in church, even though I did sing in the choir here and there. But I had no idea how to make an EP. And I remembered um, going through the process of going to the studio, you know, talking to the sound engineer, how to construct the song, the verses, the chorus, the bridge, the outro, the intro, the artwork that goes into creating a CD, the promotion that goes into that, the money, the effort, the the team that you have to put in place to make that work, from the musicians you hire to the sound engineers to the consultants you hire, just to make sure that you're on the right track and you have the best people for the work you're trying to get done. That was a first time experience for me, and I had no clue what I was doing. I probably still don't till today, but just to just to reinforce the idea that taking a leap of faith was what, allowed me to print out that first EP, which, even though I cringe at the sound recording, I'm very proud of. And I'm glad I took that, leap of faith. But also, that leap of faith allowed me to eventually hit the road as a full-time musician to becoming what I am today, Nelly's Echo, however successful I've been today. And even the whole process of being on tour eventually led me to the show NBC's The Voice in season 3. And yeah, all of these snowball effects that happened to me as a performer could not have happened if I didn't take that first initial leap of faith. So this podcast is my leap of faith. It's me basically saying to the world that I feel very strongly that I have something to say, um, and I'm going to take a leap of faith with this. I don't have high expectations. I've tempered my expectations for the podcast with regards to um, how I will define success for my podcast. I believe right now the way I'll define success for my podcast is just being consistent, and I'll explain more about that later on. But what I also hope to accomplish with the podcast is to have civil discourse about different points of views and different topics. I think that's important. Um, it's it's and that kind of ties into my next reason for doing the podcast, because I believe with civil discourse, and he can enable me through this platform to possibly have discourse with people that I might not see eye to eye with or disagree with, but at the same time not take away the worth, the innate worth that they have in them as human beings. And I think that's paramount. The reason why I say that is because um, all too often in today's society, I feel that um, we're very quick to take away the worth that another person has by the language we use, by playing identity, whether it's identity perspective, identity politics, identity religion, identity whatsoever. It's like, because I believe what I believe and you believe what you believe, um, that gives me a reason to say something or do something to take away the worth that exists within you, that God has given you innately, that no one can take from you. Um, so I want to have a platform where I can celebrate that, this civil discourse, and celebrate the human worth. I think that's very important. So that's part of why I want to do a podcast. And I've been married now. Let's see, I got married last year, April, so April of 2019, and I love being married. But also being married is a challenge, because you're living with someone 24/7, and it forces you to acknowledge the things about yourself that maybe you took for granted that are flaws. Um, I've realized one of my flaws. Um, Now, I'm not saying it's a flaw as in that it's held me back in life, but I realized something that I probably need to get better at is my active listening. Um, because, you know, I, like most people, will, in a conversation, will just talk. And then when the other person's talking, I'm sometimes just waiting for them to be done so I can just, spew out my next, thought process, or spew out my next, rhetoric. And not saying that I don't sometimes have healthy conversations, which I do, but I notice more often than not that I am not listening. Like I'm not actually listening to what the other person is saying. I I sometimes zone out, or I sometimes just hear a catchphrase they say and my mind goes off somewhere and I'm waiting for my turn to talk again. So I think doing the podcast and is going to help me grow as an active listener. And I'm looking forward to all those awkward, uncomfortable, challenging situations that will force me to grow. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like I want to grow as a person. I want to grow as a human being. I want to grow as a musician. I want to grow as a conversationalist. I want to grow um, just in general. I want to satisfy my curiosity by interviewing and chatting with different people from different walks of life. That's a beautiful thing. Um, One of the gifts I have received as a musician, especially a traveling musician, is that I get to see different people from different walks of life, old, young, white, black, you know, male, female, and everything in between, um, rich, poor. I get to see the whole gamut, different ethnicities, different cultures, foods, weather, and 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 I love it. It gives me an appreciation for people. And I feel like, with this podcast, I would be able to continue to satisfy that curiosity in the world we live in right now, especially when we can't travel as much and we can't engage physically as much as we used to uh, during COVID and post COVID, possibly. That I want to continue to satisfy my curiosity and grow as a person. And I think that's healthy. I think I think when I can sit down across the room or across this media from another person, and we can have conversations like this, where you know it can be a topic that is uncomfortable or challenging, whatever, and we can grow, we can grow together from that topic. We can agree to disagree, but still be civil about it, and hopefully understand better our point of view, maybe modify our point of view based off the other person's point of view that makes sense and is rational and coherent. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So, how am I going to do this? I have not the slightest of clues, but I believe there might be some elements of music. I'm trying to keep both separate, but I'm a musician first, so don't be surprised if I break into some random song here and there. There might be elements of music. There might be elements of like I said, I might do this solo a couple of times. Just if I have a perspective that I want to be unfiltered and un, um, undiluted, I will do some solo podcasts moving forward. But primarily, I want this to be like a conversation. I will have people that I respect, disagree with, love, not love. Um, um, in terms of their perspectives, I'll have them on and we'll have the discussions now. And I'll reach out to some of my friends that I respect what they do and respect their points of views too. And we'll have those conversations moving forward. So it'll be mostly conversations um, I plan to do in this podcast. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, so with regards to starting this podcast, all I have is my microphone. By the way, to backtrack a little bit, it's funny how when you take a leap of faith and you take action and you stay disciplined with your action, you start to amass things that support your vision. So um, this microphone right here, this exact setup is something that I bought in order to delve into the world of production, music production. So for those musicians out there or those who are aware of music, um, their softwares like Pro Tools and Logic, musicians like myself use to record their music to a very expert level, and then we can then shop it out to the public at large. Um, I am still a novice when it comes to music, and when it comes to music production, excuse me, I'm a novice. But during this whole pandemic quarantine period, I decided to take up a new skill, and that new skill was music production. So I got my Logic Pro on my computer. I got a brand new computer. Um, I had this from before, but I know I unearthed this from the bag it was buried in. I brought this back out, and and this thing that I thought was just going to be a thing for my music has now become a thing that I'm using for my podcast too. So just taking a leap of faith in just music and music production has also pivoted to something I use for my podcast. So I have my, I think it's the AKGP 220 microphone, and just like a simple mic stand. And I'm keeping it simple. I just want to get the ball rolling. I don't have I don't have a clue how to do what I'm supposed to do. There's a lot of things about podcasting I do not know. I don't know the business of the podcast. I don't know the networking of the podcast. I don't know the proper media and channels to record the best, video and sound and merge and marry those two together properly. I don't know I don't know a lot of things about podcasting, but I'm taking a leap of faith. So I guess if I had to give the moral of this podcast, it's taking a leap of faith. And I hope this first one actually feels good to you, the viewer. I hope it feels like professionally done, but um, if it doesn't, understand that it will only get better from starting the process. And I'll give you a good example. One of my passions is jujitsu. So I believe 2 years ago, I started taking up jujitsu like consistently. I'll go like twice a week, and I'll go, and I love MMA, mixed martial arts. And not so much the violence, but just the artistry about, how I can train myself to the point where I can control another human being and manipulate their bodies. It's I'm addicted to MMA, but I especially love jujitsu. And I remember the first day I went to jujitsu class, and I was scared beyond my mind because my world is soccer. I'm a soccer player. I played soccer my whole life, so I'm comfortable in the soccer field. If I'm in shape and I'm playing against anyone, I don't care who you are, I'm comfortable. That's my world. I've lived in that world my whole life. But jujitsu was new for me. Was brand new. As an adult, I stepped into this gym, and I see all this grown men and some women, and I can just tell if these people wanted to, you know, uh, beat me up at any time, or take advantage of me, they could, because they're just better skilled than me. If we ever got into an altercation, well, there goes my life, there goes my limb, there goes my head. And so walking into there was kind of daunting, and you're forced to face your fear. You're forced to face your ego, and you're forced to kill your ego. So I remember, and I want to tell this story to make a point. So I remember when I was the first class, and we were going through the roles and everything. It was cool, teaching us the techniques, and obviously they realized that was my first time, and people went easy with me. But I remember about the third class, we had to do, like, it's called like just roll with your partners, where you just get on the mat and you just roll, and you practice, the things you've learned, the techniques you've learned. And I rolled with this other guy who was a very, very high level white belt. Now he wasn't very generous. And I rolled with him, and he got on top of me, like, and then he mounted me, and he put his forearm on my neck, and he was basically choking me out. And I remember then, because I'd only been to the class for like 3 times, I remember I had no clue what to do to get out of that position. Like, I've wrestled before, and as a wrestler, I'm more used to taking you down and holding you there. But when you're in the bottom with someone that's decently skilled in jujitsu, you have no clue what to do to get out, and you feel helpless, and you feel vulnerable, and that sucked. And I remember that after he placed his arm on my neck, I tapped, and I left the gym that day, felt this small. I felt this small. And I'm like, man, I tapped. I'm weak. But I realized that was not true. I've taken so many leaps of faith over the years, that I realized that no, that's not the truth. That it's just a fleeting moment. That the only way you get better and comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling is to continue putting yourself there. So I continued doing the jujitsu, and every day I would get ragdolled, and every day I would feel like, someone was choking the life out of me, and every day I would tap. And then I kept going for like 6 weeks. I kept going, and I got to a point, because I'm physically, like, I'm a very strong person. I'm in decent shape, but I was not skilled at all. But I got to the point after like 6 weeks of 2 times a week or 3 times a week going to jujitsu, that I got some kind of proficiency. And it got to the point where there was a gentleman who was like, once again, a really high level white belt. So white belt is the first level of jiu-jitsu, like white belt, and then it goes to black belt. And there's several colors in between. But I remember this time I rolled with this guy. And prior to that class, one of the instructors had taught me like a very good defense to not getting submitted, to not getting, put in the bottom, because I started off on top. So he taught me this technique to stay on top. So that way they don't flip me around and then they can choke me. So this high level white belt actually competed in several competitions locally, and he was very proficient. And I won't mention his name because that's irrelevant. But and he was very generous, I would have to say. But on this particular day, he wanted to try out some things. He was some techniques on me, and I'm fine. I volunteered myself so I can try my techniques on him as well. And we just started rolling and rolling, and I just applied the techniques I knew. And then one time he got me on my back, and he placed his forearm on my neck. And 6 weeks ago, I would have tapped, but I had learned some techniques, and I used those techniques I had learned in the 6 weeks to frame, like it's called framing. I shrimped out, which is a jiu-jitsu term. I shrimped out, and I got an underhook on one side, and I used that as my leverage to reverse the position. And he was shocked that I did, because he didn't know I knew that technique. So I took him by surprise. And we rolled for like a good 5 minutes, which in jujitsu for a beginner is like 50 minutes, just so you know. And we rolled for 5 minutes, and I got back on top, and I controlled him, and he was frustrated. And now I didn't come out of that experience thinking, oh yeah, Nelson the conqueror, Nelson the world dominator. I didn't come out of that experience thinking that. I actually came out of that experience thinking, wow, when you take a leap of faith and you stay consistent with it, eventually you start getting somewhere, and somewhere, eventually you get to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And at each level, you get beat up. At each level, you take your L's. At each level, you get your failures. But if you stay consistent, you just keep at it and keep at it, eventually you get to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. I am a musician right now that travel the whole world. People pay me good money to come play at different places. And when I first started, I had no clue, but I just kept at it and kept at it. The jujitsu was the same thing. I kept at it, kept at it. Now I had to stop jujitsu because I injured myself to the point, as a physical therapist, I had to treat myself, but I had what, we call a brachial plexus, injury, where my first rib here was elevated. My scalenes, it's a muscle, neck muscle group, were tight. And it was pinching in my brachial plexus to the point where I lost like 75% of the strength in my arm. And I had to rehab from that because I was being placed in like a triangle choke over and over again from like the practicing the techniques. Anyway, that's another story for another day. Anyway, I say that to say, if you stay consistent, you eventually make progress. And my goal is to eventually, once all this post COVID thing, quarantine, once all the coronavirus issue resolves, hopefully, prayerfully, that I can return back to getting my butt whipped in jiu-jitsu class and getting better and better every day. So I'm applying the same principle to my podcasting. I am going to get my butt whooped in this podcast, and I look forward to it. I look forward to people making, looking at me and saying, "Oh man, he shouldn't have said that. He should have said that," and that's okay. I look forward to those too because they will only make me better. I look forward to the great conversations too that can be helpful not just to the conversationalist but also to the people who watch. And so yeah, that's just the gist of what the podcast is going to be about. So this is my first one. I'm looking forward to many, 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 many more. And thank you all so much for your support for Nelly's Echo, the musician. I would employ that if you like what I do as a musician, um, please come with me on this journey as a podcaster. And hopefully, what I do on this media is of value to you. It gives you the feeling of worth that no one can take away from you or me. I love you all. And till the next time we meet again, keep making good music and podcasts, the soundtracks to your lives. Peace.